for some of you who knows me too, I'm an entomologist by training, so I know a thing or two about pest management or like insect control or like whatever you call it, because there is a big debate now in the scientific community about the terminology. Is it like pest control, is it pest management, integrated pest management, or something else? So like the terms that is, coined for about 75 years now is integrated pest management, which is like more of using different approaches, not only one, to achieve some effective and also, more environment-friendly approach of the management of insect or control of insect. And we'll try to know with others, but right now we are banning, or like BP is banning long ago, except maybe like one occasion when they are fighting malaria in the sub-Saharan countries, but that's it, and it was desperate to use so far. But let's put it like into perspective. Chemical control was, it was effective actually. You spray something and boom, everything is gone. And it increased food supply. We like saved a lot of food going to waste because of the pest like injury and all of that. And it was profitable. Whatever you are putting in terms of dollar here, you are getting a lot of it, a lot of it at the end. And let's put it also in more scientific way. It's safe if we are using it the right way according to the label. So it is not as dangerous as you might think. I'm dealing with these chemistries now for almost 20 years. I'm still alive. But there is a lot of disadvantage as well. And it is like not secret of the disadvantage, especially like the health and the environmental aspect of it. And we are trying all the time to minimize that, and we are trying to get away of some of them. But there is also some of more of, let's say, operational problem here. When you are like spraying or like treating any insect with chemical, you have two groups. One would be like very susceptible for this chemical. Once you apply this chemical, they will die. And the other would be resistant. No matter what you will apply, you will still there, right? So what we are doing most of the time, and especially at the early era of chemical reliant system, is that we are spraying what we call like a broad spectrum insecticide. That's an insecticide that will kill everything, good and bad. And with that, some of these insects, we said that they are susceptible, they will die. But what will happen for the rest, the resistant one, they are still there. What we know about insects is that they are quite good in reproduction. They can go into generation in a very short time. And the resistance itself is genetic. So they will be inherent of these insects who would be very resistant to whatever chemical or compound that you are applying. And we ended up after a few generations with what? A whole population that is resistant. A whole population that no matter what we add and what we treat and what we spray, is still there. We are not like taking this chemical as lethal compound, but more like, give me again, more. That's water for me. So with that in mind, we are like building this, what we call the pesticide treatment, that we are like applying this broad spectrum. We are like selecting against the resistant one. We have more of this resistance. We fail, and we have an outbreak of another insect, and going on and on like that. So not only that, but even like chemical itself and pesticide is not an easy, business to like invent. It's very, money intense, and like I want to like share with you some of this figure here to just see how much it could cost. This is here the cost of only like the discovery and development of some of these plant protection compounds. This is only the discovery and development, not to talk about the manufacturing or marketing or anything as shit. And like back in 2019, and that's the last data, it's almost like $300 million to come up with new compound, only a single compound, just for discovery and development. Now we are talking that it's like they are still crunching some new data, and they are talking about $750 million for only one compound. And imagine how that would work and what would be like the amount of resources that are going behind that. Not only that, but now it would take like a lot of time to bring any of these new chemicals. Back in the days, it was about maybe 8 years Now we are pushing 13 years just to bring one new chemical. So that's how it goes. Not only that, but even if you look back in the day, you know, this yellow or orange bar here represents, you know, whatever, you know, compound that you might start with, and the black one here represents, you know, whatever end up as a launch or like new product. You can see like these black bars, they're going down, which means, you know, we can have a lot of these new chemicals, but what end up in the market are very few. So even like chemicals as weapon or like an invention or anything is not also available all the time. It takes a lot of time, takes a lot of resources, and many of the time we are losing them in very short window. So it is not even like a sustainable way to manage or to kill insects after all. So there is a lot of challenges associated also with that, like the resistance, we talked about it, and also like there is some restriction for many of the insecticide, and this is no surprise, and that's to get, you know, all of the pressure and maintain some response to the environmental and health factors here. And there is a lot of public opinion against, you know, using chemicals. There is no doubt about it. Once you are talking about chemicals, oh, you think, you know, all of this, you know, skulls and the two bones, and that's bad. But you know what? The chlorine that we are using at home is chemical, and there is a label for it, and you have to abide by this label. Salt is chemicals, sugar is chemical. So we have to think about it, and we have to have our opinion there about that a little bit evolved. But regardless, like as I'm always saying to my colleague, is like pest as a concept is a societal issue. If the insect is there and nobody cares about it and do not say no damage or like no benefit, nobody will talk about it. But once there is something there, we'll start to have a discussion about it in as a society and how to deal with it. So more of like focus would be like as human and the other activities, we are focusing mostly first at the economic aspect of any of these pests. And there is like the whole debates, and just again going back for like a couple of centuries, about control versus management when it comes to dealing with some of these pests. And the control is just like kill everything, do whatever technology we have. So this is a concept that, you know, went for like a long time until maybe like the late 1960s. Like a good insect is a good insect, regardless. Despite the fact that we have almost like 98, 99% of the insect population are beneficial, some way or another. Only 1 or 2% are the insects that making damage to our crops or like our health or so on. So most of the time, you know, the management here is to reduce, you know, the impact to tolerable level. To put it like in a very, you know, simple way in terms of like a dollar sign, if you have an insect that would do a damage that will cost you, let's say, $50 per an acre, but you would have a management tool or a control tool that will cost you only $20. Here you are like justifying this management of control tools because you will gain about $30. But if it's the vice versa, if it's like the insect cost, or the damage of this insect will cost you about $20, and the control measure will cost you $50, you are in the deficit here. So it's better to nothing. So that's a simple way of like bringing it in terms of management. But there is also like other factors that will come, as I said, like the environmental and the health factor play a role here. So management needs a lot of information. You need to know how much this insect will cost you in terms of damage, how much you will pay in terms of like the control measure, and you make your decision based on that. And there is a whole, you know, science section about in the pest management about what we call the economic injury level and the economic threshold. How much of this, you know, money would be there that will justify any control measure. It's just like a threshold. Once you pass it, you can control. Once you are under it, you don't do anything. So the integrated pest management itself, and every time I'm reading about it, I think, oh God, we are just as human, as not intelligent as we think we are. Because it took us about, you know, I don't know, maybe like a few hundred millennia to come up with this concept. And it came only like in 1959. It's very simple. If you have something that will cause you that much damage, and you have a control measure against it, you will just compare the two and make your decision. Easy, right? But no, we didn't do it until like 1959. Like this guy, like Stern, he was a student at the University of California, Berkeley, and he is like advisor, and they are doing what you call like the control management, or the management aspect of insect, and they have it like published in 1959 and on a very common crop, alfalfa. And from there, it came, all of these concepts, or all of this information about IPM. We proposed that the agriculture is part of the larger ecosystem. Imagine that. Who would think about it at the time? Because before that, we have mostly like only a chemical era, from like the World War II onward. And you were supervised insect. Not only once you see insect, you would like apply something. You need to count them, you need to scout, you need to see what the damage here and how much it costs. So it's not only like just go and apply something, it needs to be something necessary to do that. And they promote the beneficial and what we call the natural enemy, because they are in the system and they are abundant. And then they said like almost 98, 99% of what we have when we go outside in terms of insects are beneficial. And like they would like to use only like chemical as a last resource, as we'll see later on. Along with that comes like the very famous book of like the silent spraying for Dr. Carson back in the early 1960s. And it gained a lot of traction more in the New Yorker at the time. It's like something if you have like your book reviewed by this magazine. And it was like the beginning of like an environmental era. And it was like putting humanity, like putting a mirror in front of us, saying whatever we are doing is not good. It's not good for the environment, it's not good for health, it's not good even for our, bottom line. So we need to change, and that change comes with, the purpose of the IPM, because the founding father of IPM actually didn't coin the term integrated pest management to IPM. It came later on, and the first time officially came actually, and that's a little bit of surprise. It came with some of the programs that's carried out by Cooperative Extension, and it came into Nixon administration, introduction of the Environmental Protection Agency, and it was there that IPM program is part. So Extension took the lead since 1970s in terms of like IPM, and it was like federal program for like about a decade or so until they cut it, of course, like many other things. But it became more and more responsibility of the growers. So they used, everything that is in the concept of IPM in terms of like scouting and making decisions based on the cost and all of these. And it evolved to be like almost multidisciplinary, as we will see later on. So what is IPM? So if you like search the terminology here, you'll end up with maybe like 100 or a couple of hundred different definitions. I like this one because it touches on like different aspects of IPM here. So first it's integrated, which means like we are not focusing on one approach. It's not only chemical. You have a lot of other ways and other approaches that you can use. The second one is like, as we said, it's like more of a management, not control. Not to kill everything, but more of like making a decision here. And it's sustainable, and that's quite important because that was like when like IPM start to evolve, they put it on different levels, and sustainability actually should be the one that at the upper level, and that's what we aspire to reach all the time, although it is very hard to do that. And it's also like a decision making at the end. It's not like just seeing an insect and doing something, but you have to calculate your risk here, and that's a risk management that you can reduce with this decision making for the IPM. Another like definition that I like is almost similar, but here as like highlighted at the bottom here, they are focusing on the three aspects of sustainability. Okay, producer with like whatever they want to make in terms of the like bottom line and the economic part of it. They are focusing on also on environment and society. And this is, if you, there will be any course or like anything about sustainability, the stool with the three legs, they are like making some definition of sustainability with these three links with the economy, environment, and society. So when it comes to like the strategies that we are using for control all the time, and this is something that makes of the IPM and how it changes mentality, we are like putting chemical at the end of our choices. It would be like the last resource. It's not the first as it used to be. And we have like a lot of other ways to manage this insect, natural, biological, cultural, legislative, and genetic and mechanical and so on. And this is here what we call like the integration of the control method. We have this, holistic approach of different methods that we can use. Our toolbox here is more, diverse than before. The whole idea out of this, is to go into through like a continuum here of IPM and switching from relying on only chemical to go to the biological reliance of the system. And with that, we have like many steps on the road. First, we need to identify the insect, as I said, to calculate these thresholds for all of them, and then to go into like, maybe if we use chemical, it could be a reduced risk or like more selective insect, going against the best but not the beneficial. And from there, we can like rely on prevention, which should be the big part of IPM. And this will which is bad feed. And then, like the struggle starts. And it is important to know your friends, right? Otherwise, you will confuse them with the enemy or the pest, and you will kill everyone. We don't want to do that. So I have like a little test here for you. And it is not like anything, very specific. Just raise your hand when you know which of these insect is. So if you think this insect here or this bug is number one, raise your hand. Is it a mini parapod or Aureus? So is it number two? False change spot. Is it number three? Big iPod? None?
Number three.
Any guess?
Number three.
Okay, good. Here we have a winner here. Yes, big eye, from big eye. It has like these big eyes here, and this is actually a very beneficial insect in our system here, and you can see here they are having these big eyes. This is actually the nymph, and this is the adult. And we are eating a lot of these insects. They are quite active. They are quite abundant in our system. So if you look and find some of these insects in our system, you can confuse it with others. The chinch bug is very similar to it. Ligas bug is very similar to it, but they have these big eyes. It's like coming, from like, I don't know what movie when you have these big eyes coming out of the body. So let's go with another one. How about this one here? Number one, assessing bug nymph. Lace wing larva. Okay, or a lady beetle larva. So it's almost between the three of them. This is actually a lace wing larva. This is quite good one, and like it's almost flat-bodied here. It has two strong mandibles, in the front, and you will capture some of this, soft-bodied insect like aphid or whitefly, and you will start to suck their sac, to suck their body, leave them dry. And they are quite active, and they can go back and forth. And you can even detect, their eggs. They have this very distinct egg that's like this. We put it on a stick like that. And this is one of the adults here, and one of the other adults have this greenish body and very transparent wing. And again, very active and very strong insect. And mostly, like we have two species here in our environment. The larvae of both species are quite active as a predator for bad insects. And good, because if you didn't find any insect, you eat anything. How about these? Who would go with number one?
I'll go for number one.
Okay, number two. How about, of course, not big enough, right? You know that. So this is like actually here, this is navy. Yeah, and again, this is the adult here, and this is the nymph. And same as the other two bugs, we have this, sucking mouth part, they insert into the body of the insect, suck all the sap there, leaving them dry. And this is very, this is very aggressive insect. I'm going with the next one that we see, going, behind and like, trying to catch as much as possible. And they are quite, fast in terms of like they're walking and they're flying, so we can go in and ambush some of these other things. How about this one? And see like how it is like the insect itself compared to some of the hair of a leaf. So it's number one? Yeah. Okay. Anybody go with number two? No. Number three? So yeah, it is number one. And this is actually a little bit of like the size compared to an alfalfa. I think that was alfalfa leaf there. And this is the nymph here. The nymph, we call it like it's like a teardrop. And it's quite small, very, very, very small. That's why the word period plus comes. And it is like, this is the one that's really I'm struggling with most of the time with identification with our grower and professionals. We go and we have them in the bottom of the sweet bed. We don't see it. Oh, this is black stuff. It might be anything that you are collecting as trash. But many times they have a very abundant population of these bugs. And again, they are quite good in terms of like feeding on soft-bodied insects, and they have a very tolerant to our hot summer. That's why you can find them during this time of the year. How about these ones? This one here. Which of these bugs? Number one. Two. Three. Okay. Yeah, this is actually here one of the two species that we have assessed. Okay, this is actually here the nymph, and it's inside a flower. This is one of the good pictures that I like about this picture. I would say I'm not positive, but it could be like a I'm sorry, but as I said, this is one of the largest, predator bug there. And in this system, the bigger will eat the smaller all the time. So this one is like on the top of the chain. They are eating most of the other insects, and they are quite strong, and they are like very aggressive, and you can ambush as many, and even like in many times I can see them can handle multiple aphids or like white fly eating them off and sucking the body all the time. And this is actually the egg mass that you can see on the leaf. This can be caught by the female. And this is the nymph of the other species. This is the nymph of one of them. And this is the adult here. And they are again very strong, very aggressive, and again quite tolerant to our environment. So how about this one? Is it a lady beetle? Number two, collapse beetle? Of course, not assessment. So this is like collapse beetle, and this is like very distinct beetle because all of the beetle has very hard wing, hard body, but this one has a soft wing. That's why it's like quite different. Of course, like also flower beetles, and it is quite distinguished by the color, the almost dark blue and red color, and you can differentiate between male and females from the antenna. The male has these very big segments at the base of the antenna, while the female doesn't have that. And again, they are quite good in feeding on almost everything that we have. And they are quite active, between almost like 19 months in the year. Only like during, December, January, when you can see only like few of them. but they are active all year round. This one will not be like, you know, a test because this is very easy. This is spider, right? And we have like good 3 species of spider here in our system in the desert. The one that I like a lot about them, what we call the crab spider. Like because of like their leg is like the leg of crab. They don't like build web like other spiders. They are quite good in like moving, and they capture like their prey. And even if their prey is bigger than them, we can capture them. And you start like munching on them. Like this photo here, we spent about like 3 hours taking one of these photos. And here like this spider catching one of these like a spot nymph and just start munching on it. So it's quite, you know, mesmerizing to see sometimes in the act. Again, one of here, the Dictinia spiders, that's the one that can do webbing as well as the jumping spider, and here they are eating, I think, a leaf hopper here. So this is very, I would say, if we have like an impact of all of the natural enemies, spider may be like responsible for 25% of everything. So yeah, we are like approaching spider, oh, they are creepy, but we are like almost 99% of them are beneficial. Only one, right? And we know it. No way of it. So, but the rest are quite good. Same as this one here, very famous lady beetles. They are very good in like feeding on soft-bodied insects, especially aphids. And more like the larva here is more active, but also the adults have the fair share of feeding on insects here. Problem with like lady beetles, they are not faithful to the side. So most of others, once you are in the field, you can stay there, you will reproduce there. But for lady beetle, most of the time, they are there because they are very strong fly. So they can go and like move from some place to the other. They like freedom. So. And last one, this is the hoverfly. This is here the larva. You can like confuse it with other larvae as well, but they are quite famous that they don't have a head. They are just, you know, a soft body all the way. And they don't have, you know, what we call the thoracic leg, which is like the leg on the chest area. And you can see here, not much leg, but more like little dot. And the actual leg that they are using for much of their movement on the abdomen area. And here they are feeding on some insect here, and mostly like the larva is a breastfeed one. The other or the fly, they feed like on mostly nectar and other things. So that's very important, as I said, in terms of like an identification, because without identification, we will not be able to distinguish between the pest and the good insect. The other thing is IPM itself is based on prevention. If most of the time when we are like talking about IPM, we represent it as a pyramid. So I'm from Egypt, so I like pyramids a lot. So yeah, so for like the foundation here is mostly about the culture and biological aspect of it. But we must, or like, let's say most of the time, but we like to focus mostly like on the one up there, which is sampling, which is very important because that's the one that will give you the base information here in terms of identification and numbers. But we also like need to make this decision if we are using chemicals. But this is not the whole story. The whole story is about avoidance, about the base of this pyramid. So you would like to go with everything about, you know, using all the aspects that we go with sampling and the use of chemicals here. And there is a lot of steps, as we mentioned them before. But for most of the time, it is the base. It is mostly like what you are doing in your system, what you are doing in your field, how healthy is your plant, what varieties you are using. All of that are coming to work together to build you a very strong case that you, once you have it, you will not need much of the top. It will be just there as, you know, alternative or something for emergency and so on. So most of the time, that's what we are missing. The base is quite narrow, and we have a very big, you know, use of chemicals and all of that. And for a system like that, we are missing, you know, most of like the element of the crop management, the biological and cultural control. And for a system like this, it's not stable. What will happen is that it will, it will collapse. And we'll be going into what we were like talking about, the pesticide treatment and going all of these cycles. So we need all of this all the time. So most of the time what we are doing is we are not managing the insect. If we want to be successful, we wouldn't focus on managing the insect. We are actually dealing with an ecosystem, the regular ecosystem that we are dealing with. And not even the crop, not the field, not the neighboring field, but we need to have a network working together to figure out what's going on. But at least we do our part here. In terms of like habitat diversification, for example, if we are going with many aspects of diversification here, we will end up actually with, minimal disturbance. We have very good organic matter, like very healthy soil. And that will increase, natural enemies. It become like more inviting habitat for this kind of natural enemies, and these natural enemies will do a good job. And we will need minimal or nothing when it comes to chemical. But going the opposite direction, and we know what will happen, this diversification, and we end up with a lot of use of chemicals, and we'll end up with less natural enemies, and the cycle is known. So this is again very, let's put this way, very common sense, but not that common. Why? Because we all the time looking for the easier solution, because this will need integration of the system. You will not be dependent on somebody like me who know, like I think about this man. You would need to know your soil health, your agronomy practice, your irrigation practice, even like your economy and marketing. You would need to know everything about the weather and the climate and how it's changing your area. All of these aspects need to come together into the decision making of any of our pest management here. And that's why at the development and evolution of IPM, we put it on different levels. So the first level here, to focus on a single thing. You have these, white flies in your crop here, and you need to manage them, and you will start to find out some technique here. I'm going to use some chemical, I'm going to use a resistant variety, what's the option? But the second level here is to look at all of the lists together, because they might be into some kind of succession. They might come and, because of the crop rotation that you have, encourage some of them. So you need to go of more of all the interaction among pests, the control techniques that you are using. This is more of the approach that we're talking about, the integration of the all different approaches of pest management. Not only the chemical, but the biological, the culture, and so on. And we need here to, think about biotic, maybe some of communal or community interchange or change of information, so we can have more of a decision into a multi-field level. But the third level here, that's the one that we are striving to even come close to it. Is that when you have all of these pest control and your ecological skill. You are not talking only about a field or two, but you are talking more about a whole system approach when it comes to that. And all of these levels, they are not working alone. There is a lot of systems. Most of the time, we just, let's put a lot of this stuff at once. But they will not work. Why? Because they are not dealing with the problems that we have. So we need to be wise when we are dealing with diversity and that. Again, habitat building with utilizing, as I said before, the cover crops and soil management. And there is a lot of results that showing us that increasing, our organic matter and other things would increase the beneficial in our system, and that's what we need to do most of the time. Another result here with less tillage, for example, you would end up with more of these ground beetles that will help eat some of your pests. But if you are going to the other direction, you will lose this population of ground beetles, which is very beneficial. Crop rotation, once you break the cycle of some of these pests, that's a good strategy to do instead of using the same crop and using a lot of input, and you end up with very less into your bottom line. So remember all the time, Pest is part of the original sustainable plan. It was there all the time. We didn't see it until like very recently. We are trying to call sustainable pest management. It's there. And that's, I think, like in 1960s. So it was there. It's not anything new. The only new thing is that we would like to integrate everything together. We would like to look at the system as a whole, not only as a single thing. So, again, this part of the IPM as a continuum, we are killing it. It is there, but we need to think of what's next. Whole system approach, we need to, practice. We need to come, as a community first, and then maybe like as a whole system, and maybe like as a whole region, and doing some of these work together. So with that, I'd like to thank you, and I'll be here if you have any questions. Okay, thank you again. It's my pleasure now to introduce my colleague and University of Arizona Public Extension plant pathologist, Dr. Bindu, and she is like working out of Yuma, but she has a very wide home state responsibility for plant pathology. And she will give her presentation today about sustainable farming as a holistic practice for disease management. Please help me welcome Bindu.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Bindu Poudel-Ward, and I am the extension plant pathologist. A lot of farmers say that they do not have disease in their field, and once they know a plant pathologist, they start having disease. So now you know me, and you know who to call if you have a problem in your field. So today we'll talk more about the basics of what are plant disease, how does it occur, how do you manage in your farm, and the basics of how do you do the diagnosis. Okay, so my program, what I was hired for is to run the plant disease diagnostic clinic, and it is run 100% on soft funds, which means that I have to bring in the money to run the program. So for that, we do a lot of field trials. Our field trial is for conventional farming, when you have a disease or insects, I work on the disease side, so we test those fungicides year after year. So we have the most relevant data available for all of you. I will have the QR code for my program at the very end, where you will be able to see all the data and all the research that we have done in the last 5 years. And then we also have a lot of applied research. Applied research is, it very much depends on the input from you guys. So if you are seeing a problem that has become more of a problem in the recent years, we will send our surveys to you guys. You can email us, letting us know that what are the problems you're facing in your farm. That way, when we write for grants, we can say that our farmers are having this problem, so we need some money to do the research. So they're very much driven by what you are seeing at the farm. So whenever you see any problem, feel free to let us know that what you are seeing and what can we do about it. And then all of these programs that we do send us information to have workshops, seminars, and field days. So I'm going to start with a very basic concept of plant disease. It is the harmful change in the normal physiological and biochemical development of a plant over a period of time. Please keep in mind, this is over a period of time. It's not something like an accident or injury that happens just like that. It is an active biological process. Whereas plant injury is something like you're walking and you break your leg or you roll your ankle, so that is more injury. And what disease is like you get a flu or you get an infectious disease that takes place over time. So please always keep in mind that what is plant disease and what is plant injury. It helps you make further decision on how to manage the problem you are having in your farm. Like I mentioned before, it involves physiological and morphological structural changes. The morphological changes, usually you can see the symptoms in a plant. I have a next picture where you can see different kind of symptoms. So on the right side is what a plant looks like when it's not healthy, and on the left is a healthy plant. This is just a diagrammatic representation of different kind of symptoms that you might see in your plant. You can see the leaf blight, the fruit spot, fruit rot, a leaf spot. You can see the gall, you can see root rot, all different kinds. Those are symptoms. So there are two things. There's sign where you can see the actual pathogen, and symptom is what plants are exhibiting. For example, you have the flu. The sign of pathogen is you can see the flu, but the symptom is you start sneezing, you start coughing. Those are the symptoms. So plants are very similar, work in a very similar way. It takes a while for them to show the symptoms. Okay, so the infectious disease, they can be caused by agents that can be and transferred from a diseased plant to a healthy plant, and subsequently cause disease in the healthy plant. They are called pathogens, and their causal organism or causal agents. So for in the plant world, there are bacteria, there are fungi, there are viruses, phytoplasma, that are known as the plant pathogens. So this is something I'm going to take a little bit of time explaining this to you. So anytime it is same with the human disease too, you have to understand the disease triangle to manage the disease that you are seeing in your field. So for any disease to happen, you need to have a pathogen that is virulent, as in aggressive or infectious. It has to be able to cause disease. And you need to have a host that is resistant, or no, not resistant. The host has to be susceptible for the disease to happen. And then you need to have an environment that has to be conducive for the disease to happen. So let's take example, a flu. So you have a pathogen. So there are so many viruses in the environment, but why are some viruses infectious and some are not? So some of them are virulent, which meaning that they can cause disease on us, and some of them are not. There are billions of microbes floating around right now, but they are not pathogen, or they are not causal agent because they do not cause disease to us. So the pathogen, it has to be aggressive, or it has to be virulent, and the host, it has to be susceptible. Like some of us can be exposed to the same environment, and some of us get the disease and some of them do not, because we are immune to some kind of pathogen, and where some of us are susceptible to same kind of pathogen. And environment, for example, flu is more of a problem in colder weather because viruses generally prefer colder weather. So environment is just not necessarily the temperature or the weather, it is also all the factors in agriculture. For example, if you have too much water in your field, if it's too wet, you are going to have disease. If it's too dry, there are other pathogens that thrive in the dry environment. So you have to understand the whole holistic idea of production to understand the disease triangle. So how do you manage this? Is you need all three of them, right? To have a disease, you break the cycle. You either are going for pathogen that is not aggressive, or you are going for host that's resistant. That's where the idea of resistant variety comes in. You might have a conducible weather, you might have pathogen there, but if your plant is resistant to that particular pathogen, you are not going to have disease. You might have pathogen that's aggressive, you might have a plant that is susceptible, but if you manipulate your environment, your intercultural practices, or how you're growing the plant in a way that it is not conducible, those two things do not get to interact with each other, then you are not getting the disease because you are not letting that cycle, the disease triangle, continue. So I'm going to give a very brief introduction about the pathogen. It's the prefix patho, which is derived from the ancient Greek, which means suffering and implies disease. It is also from the ancient Greek, gen means producer, so it is a producer of problem in our farms. For a pathogen, like I mentioned before, it has to be virulent, which means it has to be able to cause disease, otherwise it's just a microbe floating in the air or in your soil. There are the few definite causal agents that we classify in plant disease. First are the fungi and oomycetids, and there's bacteria, there's viruses, nematodes, phytoplasmas, and parasitic plant. We'll go very briefly for each of them. This is just an example that the slide will be available to you just for you to look at. I'm not going to spend too much time in this one, but it's just a diagrammatic representation of what fungi looks like, what bacteria looks like. Viruses look like, a lot of them are not visible to our naked eyes, they're all microscopic pictures. We'll start with fungi. Fungal disease is the most common that you'll be seeing in your farm. One of the example, very big problem that we have is the Irish famine caused by the lead blight of potatoes caused by oomycetes, which caused about 1 million deaths and 1.5 million mass migration to the United States. So if you think about it, the reason we have an excuse to get day drunk in St. Patrick's Day was caused because of the pathogen. And other fungi are downy mildew fungi, powdery mildew fungi, rust fungi, smut fungi. There will be different kind of fungi that you will be you have the potential of seeing in your farm. Another example of a very devastating fungi that we had in the United States is in the American chestnut. How many of you here have seen a chestnut tree? Oh, good. But this used to be a very common, for lack of a better word, like household or a farmhold, or it was present everywhere in the eastern Appalachian Mountains. It was a source of food and timber, supplied 2/3 of the tannic acid in the U.S. at some point, and there was a saying that not only was a baby's grave likely made of chestnut, but chances were so was the old man's coffin. So it was a household name for generations. It was perfect tree for wildlife because of its regenerative character, which means that if the tree topples down or if you cut the tree, it will send out sprouts, and you will have it was almost impossible to eradicate it. But then there was a disease called chestnut blight, which was first found in New York in 1944, and the trees developed canker, stem branch, and then the stem and branches got girdled, and the tree would die. But because of the regenerative nature of the tree, the plant would sprout again, and infection reoccurred. So if you look at the disease triangle here, the source, the host is continuously being available for the pathogen. And within 2 years, it was found in 4 more states. The pathogen would infect the plant, stay as saprophyte even after the plant died. And ascospore was spread by rain, splashes, wind, birds, and insects, which is a very prevalent environmental thing in the East. So by 1940, there were more than 4 billion trees were eliminated. So this is how the majestic chestnut forest in the Appalachian Mountains just resulted in the multi-stem bushes, and this is something that still they have not found cure of. There are a couple of researches that have been done on the hypervirulence, which is they're working on finding. They have found few viruses that infects the fungi and makes the fungi weak, where they're in the pathogen side of the disease triangle. They're trying to weaken the pathogen so everybody can live. The next one, we're going to move to the bacteria. Bacteria are the second most common pathogens in causing plant disease. One of the examples is citrus canker. There's also, if you go to the coast, you will see those ornamental pears growing in there, and you would see some leaves that are dying towards the top. That is one of the common diseases that's called the fire blight. It almost looks like the fire caught that, just few limbs in the tree, the twigs, not even limbs. So just to give you a little bit of introduction about the citrus canker, it is caused by 2 species of bacteria. It was first found in 1912 in Florida, Georgia border. And what is interesting and very sad about this disease, it took scientists, growers, all the community, 20 years to eradicate this disease. And the way it is explained, it was a lot of headache because you have these plants infected and you're not being able to get. And then a lot of heartache because the only way to eliminate was to burn down all the citrus orchards. So you are looking at your orchard, you're just burning it. It was a lot. It is one of the very emotional part in the era of the plant disease management. Even now, if anybody sees anything that looks like citrus canker in Florida, they are obligated to inform the authorities about it, and they will do the quarantine to make sure that it is contained and it's not going anywhere. If I'm going to draw your attention towards the disease cycle here, because it kind of aligns with the disease triangle. If you look here, we had citrus growing in Arizona at that time when it happened in Florida, right? And with the trade and everything, I'm pretty sure we brought in all that disease with us, but it was never a problem for us Because if you look at it, why does it have it here that we do not have in Arizona and only Florida has it? Rain. So see, if you don't have the environment, you can have the pathogen, you can have the disease, but you are not going to get, you can have the pathogen, you can have the host, you are not going to get the disease. So those are all the things that you have to consider or think about when you are working about disease management in your farm. Okay, moving on to the viruses. There are systemic infection, which means that there's once, unlike human, where the virus comes in, they complete their cycle and they go to the next host. In plants, they never leave the plants, so they're always there. So there's systemic infection. There is no cure. However, if you are focusing on the plant health, if you have more of a resistant variety, you can subside the symptoms and you can still get decent yield. There are a lot of orchards that we know that have the virus, but they have been able to get some product from them. They usually have the mosaic, model, or colorful patterns in your plants, which is to attract insect vectors, so the insects can feed on the plant and go to the next plant and transmit them. So while the rest of the world is arguing that whether viruses are living or not, they are just here manipulating all the living things, starting from plant to insects. One of the common disease that we have in viruses is in plants is the cassava mosaic virus. It is a virus complex, which meaning that a lot of times if you see a plant that looks like a virus, the chances are it is not just one virus. There's definitely two or more than that. So usually it's a virus complex that causes the symptoms. This is a virus complex that is threatening the food security in African countries where it is the main source of their starch. And it is vectored by whiteflies. So it's warm down there. Whiteflies love warm weather. And if cassava were to grow in Alaska, we probably would not have the problem with the disease being that big of a problem because we don't have the environment, which is the vector that transmits the virus. So always be on the lookout for insects. Dr. Mostafa is probably going to talk a lot more about the insect part, but we have this thing we talk in Yuma that when in doubt, scout. And when you're not in doubt, you scout more. So you should always be in watch for the insects. And disease too. Phytoplasma are pretty much bacteria with cell wall-less bacteria. We have not seen much of a problem. Well, I have not experienced much of a problem in here yet. It is more of a problem that they have seen in Florida. I just want to let you know that I know that you probably have seen similar symptoms in queen palm, where I don't know if you get calls or if you have queen palm having problem not growing well. My answer to anybody who calls me about the diagnosis or what to do is I just ask them to not grow queen palm because we just do not have the soil. We just do not have anything that supports queen palm. So you might create some microenvironment in the backyard. I have seen a couple of growers when they have already lots of trees growing in the backyard and they're getting that microenvironment where it's a little bit more humid and cooler. I have seen some decent queen palms, but if you look at the soil, if you look at the pH, we just don't have the soil to grow queen palm. Okay, the next one I want to bring into attention is whenever you have a pathogen, you also have an inoculum. So inoculum is a pathogen or a path that starts the infection. So you always have to think, if you see a disease, always try to go a few weeks back and see that where did the inoculum come from? Where is it coming from? Because by the time your plants, your trees, your vines are showing the symptom, it started at least weeks ago. If you're talking tree, the symptom started a couple of years ago. When by the time your tree is showing a symptom, it's a lot of times it's almost a little too late. So always look out for the very, very nuances in the symptoms. There are different kinds of sorts of inoculum that you can get. It can come from leaves, from the past crop. It can also come from seeds. So that is why they have a seed certification program. And something to be careful about the seed is a lot of batches pass the seed test if they have less than certain amount of infection. For example, if they are looking for a bacteria, if less than 1% of seed is infected, there's different regulation for different disease, but they will pass the they will pass the inspection. But when you are growing that in your greenhouse, you have to watch out for the environment that you are giving, because you might have one tree, one plant, one seedling out of 100 that has the bacteria, but what you are providing there is bacteria love the warmer weather, they love rain, so if you're growing your seedlings in the greenhouse where it's humid, you're sprinkle irrigation, then that one plant can potentially infect the other 99 plants. So have to be very careful about your irrigation schedule. A lot of time it is advised to irrigate in the morning, especially if you're using sprinkle irrigation. That way the sun dries the excess air during the day and you have less chances of disease. This is an example that I want to show about the inoculum. So if you see this is a disease called the sclerotinia drop. It is a big problem in lettuce industry. This is a survival structure, so it can live in the soil after your plants is harvested for years, and it can just survive and get in survival mode. And when you have the crop next year, you can get infection, and then you might end up having just a couple of plants in the area that succumb to the disease. Or if there is a favorable environment where you have a little bit of humidity, it usually happens in December when we get a little bit of rain and it raises the humidity, and then a little bit of fog to move those spores, because the way one of these spore works is it explodes and it has billions of spores in there. So if you have a gentle wind moving towards your field and you have a susceptible field, and then you're going to lose all of your crops. I have been to a field of a couple of 100 acres and there was not a single plant that was alive, because it was a susceptible variety. And not to give you more thing to think about or more confuse you even more, but that is also a decision that you have to make as a grower. Are you going to grow susceptible variety, or are you going to grow resistant varieties? And then there are so many factors that will drive your decision, because a lot of times susceptible varieties are the one with characteristics that your consumer like. They have this crunchiness, they look nicer and all of that. A lot of time resistant varieties, at least from my very limited experience, we're growing 3 varieties of lettuce to do a trial on downy mildew, and there was this variety growing amazing, very fast, and because you are getting your return pretty quick. They grow faster, they have perfect head, but they are also extremely susceptible to the disease. And we had a variety growing next to it, no disease at all, but it is growing extremely slow, and it not necessarily has all the features that the consumer want or the grower want in that marketing chain. So this is a quick slide that I'm going to tell you about different kind of parasitism. Obligate parasite is some of the pathogens are obligate parasite, which means that they can only grow on living tissue. They cannot grow in anything else. So those are viruses, a lot of viruses. They can only grow in living tissue. And then there are saprophyte, like the ones we talked about in chestnut tree. They can grow, the obligate parasite, they can only grow on dead plants, like most mushrooms, yeast. And facultative saprophyte is, they are usually parasite, but when the plant dies, they can also live in the dead plant of the plant, dead tissue of the plant. And facultative parasite is, they're usually saprophyte, which means that they prefer the dead tissue, but they can also live as parasite under certain condition. For example, if you see some of those big mushrooms growing at the base of your tree, first they are infecting the dead part of your of a tree, but slowly they also start parasiting the living part of your tree, eventually killing your tree. So when you see those big mushrooms going under your tree, I mean, if you like mushrooms, you can keep them, but if you want to keep your tree, you should probably get rid of them. Okay, so we're going back to a little bit of the basics here. How much time do I have? 20 more minutes, right? Okay. So to understand disease, we're going to go a little bit back towards more on the botany side, the basics of the plant. So how does a pathogen enter into plants? How does the pathogen enter in our system? They're going through the natural opening, right? It's going through your nose or through your mouth, or if you have a wound, it's going to be infected from your open wound. So it is the same for plant pathogens too. They need to go either through natural opening or from mechanical injury. So there's stomata, hydathos, lenticels. They're all the natural opening in plant that you have to keep in mind when to water your plants and different kind of horticultural practices. We always have to try not to have any mechanical injury in our plant because that is always a site of infection. And there are other pathogens like penicillium, rhizopus. They can only invade the host through fresh wounds, so they cannot even go through the natural opening. There's a lot of mechanism involved how pathogens actually get into the plant. I'm going to show you this example. This is a citrus tree that was brought to my lab, a whole citrus next to my lab. It was dead, but we never complain about sample size or the amount of sample. I'll explain in the later slide that whenever you are sending me sample, I will never say you send too much sample. I would rather you send me however much you can. But anyway, so this was a tree. I was brought in, and the first I check usually is the roots, and so this is the root. It's all clean, and I go to the more on the crown area, and I see some. You see that this is not as clean as this one, which means that the pathogen has infected the vascular tissue. And you see those these black things are usually powdery. They're called the sooty canker. So sooty canker on its own is a very, very weak fungus. It's present everywhere. If you drive around and if you see some ficus tree, just half of the tree dying and it just black stuff and white stuff, it's usually sooty canker. Last year when the temperature was very high, we got a lot of citrus trees, ficus trees infected with that virus. So this is, as I said, is a very weak fungus, so it can only infect your plant if you have mechanical injury or sunburn. So this particular tree has a sunburn right here, and then that's where the pathogen got in. So always protect your trees. There's pens available to protect from sunburn, because if you have any sunburn, if you have any tissue opening, you are going to get pathogens because they are present everywhere. However, if you get it, if you see something like the citrus, I don't know, I keep saying citrus, ficus, what you have to do to protect your tree is you start cutting down the limb, and then you keep cutting until you don't see like any kind of vascular discoloration anymore. Because this has the inoculum in it, this has the fungi in it, and you want to get rid of it. And at this point, after that, you have to start cut another 6 inches at the very least, because remember I talked about before that there might be a pathogen, but you're not seeing the symptoms yet. So we're trying to get rid of that aspect and keep your plants healthy. So another 6 to 12 inches, however much you can spare, so you can save a tree. In this case, there was no saving because the infection started right at the crown. So the only way I could go, only further I could go from that was to the roots. Okay, so a little bit about the entry part. This will be very quick. I will have the slides available to you guys, so I don't have to talk too much here. It is by the direct penetration to the host epidermis layer, and where they go into the plants and get the nutrients out of the plant cells. Some of them have very little mycelium, 1 or 2. Some of them have a lot of them. So if you look at here, with that many fungi, fungal mycelium going in, the plant is not going to have too much chances of survival. Bacteria, they go through natural openings like lenticels, stomata, hydathos, etc. And the motility, the bacteria, it needs some kind of moisture. So there are some, that is the reason that I was saying that to do the irrigation when the sun will dry immediately. Again, not to confuse you too much here, but there is also other factors. Do you want to do the irrigation in the morning? Because if you talk to, I don't know if you have any irrigation people, but if you talk to them, irrigating at night is better use of your water efficiency. So you'll have to, understand what is more important to you at this point. Is water more scarce, or your chances of losing something to a disease is more of a problem? So, those are the logics that you have to decide to make any kind of decisions. Okay, so this is one more about the pathogen entry into the plants. There are some bacterial pathogens that can enter through the hydrathodes. This is an example. I just have this slide because I know we get a lot of this in big scale farming. I don't know what I'm allowed to say commercial and non-commercial now, but big scale, small scales, all kinds of farm, wherever you have this pathogen, you are going to you have a very high chance of getting this. And this is usually, sometimes it comes with the seeds, sometimes it is already present in your soil. But the diagnosis is pretty easy. If you are seeing symptoms in the plant that has some wilted leaves or angular spots in your leaf and your plant is dying, you just do the cross section and you can see this, or you can see the samples to me. So for some of the pathogens, wounds are the only avenue. This is something that you will see in some of your crops. This right here, you see a lot in cauliflower, you can also see in broccoli, but a lot of that is actually not necessarily a disease. It is more like a secondary infection. You know, if you cut your hand, that was not a disease, but you have an open wound and you can have secondary infection. Same goes for the plants as well. So you can have wounds that are by sand, hail, insect feeding, frost. So at night, sometimes in February, January, February, the night temperature can go low as low as in mid 30s or even lower 30s. So what that causes is the frost damage in the plant, and when it gets rapidly changes to 70 degrees during the day, the plant is going through too much change and some of the cells might die, and that's when you can have secondary infection. Okay, so that was the disease triangle where we talked a lot about the pathogen. Let's focus a little bit on the host. So if you think of it, of a host, a lot of your plants are actually already resistant, because just the way a lot of us are resistant to a lot of things that are diseases that are out there. So when you just look at the disease, we think that, oh, there's too many diseases happening, or there are too many diseases in the world. But if you think of it, that not all of us are getting all the disease that is out there. So there is one gene in pathogen that provides virulence, and there's a gene in the host that provides resistance. So it is where it is more like a lock and key method, because not all the all the pathogens are going to cause disease in all the plants. It's a very, very specific relationship that has to happen for that to occur. So let's move to the next one. So the resistant, it is the ability of the host plant. For example, we go out there, we're exposed to the pathogen, but if you are healthy, you're kind of resistant to the pathogen, you are not going to get the disease. Same applies for pathogen too. They might have different level of resistance. And then there is also called disease tolerance, where it is you are infected, but you are strong enough that you are still going to survive, or going to get certain ill that you are still going to get from the plant. It is most evident in plant parasitic nematodes, and I will show you one picture of this. So this is a field that has the same soybean cyst nematode, but this one has higher density, and this one has low density. It is the same variety. So the nematode is still present there, but it is not going to affect your yield because the plant has that particular variety has tolerance towards the nematode infection. So this is resistant. Pathogen can be, a plant can be immune, or highly, moderately, or slightly resistant. You have to understand that if a plant is immune, it is absolute, just like us. If you're immune, you are immune. You are not getting 10% infected or 5% infected. It's 100% non-infected. And where resistant is relative. It can be highly resistant, moderately resistant. Those are the list. It is actually available to you whenever you are buying a variety. It is available. It is highly resistant, or it is moderately resistant. And of course, using resistant variety is the first line of defense against many plant diseases. It is, and you can understand. I want you to understand that resistant. It is available in all of us, in all the plants, because of the morphological and physiological characteristics. So this one is apparent resistant, which can be used in the field of agriculture. So it is, you still have a susceptible plant, but you are planting when that pathogen is not available in the field. Or, for example, let me give you an example. So we have fusarium problem in Yuma, a lot. Farmers lose millions of dollars every year. that usually happens when you plant at the normal schedule, whenever it's required in the market in September. But if you wait until October and plant in October, you're not going to have any disease at all. That particular disease, I mean. So this is usually planting early or planting late. There are a lot of varieties that that is available in the market for you, whatever crop you're looking at, that can be early planted or late planted. So they all have some kind of implication in, to avoid, some of them are to avoid disease, some of them are to avoid high heat or low heat, frost, all those kind of factors. And these are all the things that you can think of in terms of planning for the field is, our business is you are planting susceptible host or finding plants for which pathogen is not present in your area. So this can be a little bit tricky because we, as researchers, we report everything that we see. We try our best to see. For example, we can say that certain diseases are not present in Arizona. But again, at the same time, they might